Historians have portrayed the Roman Emperor Domitian as a psychotic, Christian-killing practitioner of incest. But despite these dubious credentials, he's never achieved the level of infamy reached by the likes of Nero and Caligula. This may be because these allegations are false. But true or not, one thing we did learn from Domitian is the danger of paying too much attention to your horoscope. Domitian's dad and brother had both served as emperor, so for a modern equivalent, he was kind of like a Jeb Bush or a Prince Andrew. But unlike Jeb and the disgraced Andy, Domitian followed his male kinfolk into the top job. There's little doubt that he was a tyrant, but unusually for the period, he managed to balance his tyrannical acts with more mundane tasks fairly well. He was known to be a micromanager, taking direct control over issues of the economy, taxation, and even building projects. He erected a new athletics arena that wasn't quite as durable as the Colosseum envisioned by his dad and finished by his brother, but it was a nice addition nonetheless. He was also an antiquarian version of Vince McMahon, in that he jazzed up the traditional gladiatorial contests by organising the first all-female bouts. He also invited dwarfs from around the empire to compete in a deadly combat. The plebs then, as now, loved this type of spectacle, and to top it all, he even flooded the Colosseum with water so his performers could reenact sea battles on huge warships. From the perspective of the average Joe, these types of actions made Domitian seem pretty cool. But crucially, there was one group of Romans that hated him, the Senate. Technically, the old republic had been replaced with a dictatorship a century before, but previous Roman emperors had maintained the facade of a powerful Senate just to keep the aristocratic class happy. Domitian was a more practical man, and in calling a spade, he made it clear that the Senate was a joke, and that he was the omnipotent force controlling Rome. Needless to say, powerful figures began conspiring against him. Perhaps unsurprisingly, an expert in divining the future by studying lightning out in Germany quickly realised that Domitian was to be assassinated on a particular day. The local authorities dispatched him to Rome, where Domitian thanked him for the information and then condemned him to death. But rather than kill him immediately, Domitian decided the soothsayer should be dispatched on the very day he had predicted the emperor would die. Presumably, Domitian was feeling a bit cocky at this point and wanted to have the last laugh when the day arrived. But troublingly, none other than the goddess Minerva popped up in one of Domitian's dreams to substantiate the story of his upcoming demise. This troubled him, and he turned to a respected observer of birds to ask him if the bird's movements offered any more mystical insight into the assassination plot. The birdman, or ogre, confirmed not only the date of his death, but even the time. Domitian was to be assassinated on the 18th of September, 96 AD, at the strike of noon. To elude his destiny, Domitian developed a simple yet cunning plan. He barricaded himself in his private quarters, with heavily armed guards outside. Once midday had been and gone on the day in question, one of his faithful servants would be allowed to access the room and let him know the danger had passed. For this task, he chose a fellow named Stephanus, who posed no great threat as he'd recently broken his arm, and in fact, he was heavily bandaged. On the 18th of September, the loyal guards frisked Stephanus, who, seemingly unarmed, entered the chambers and announced to Domitian that not only had midday passed, but that he discovered a list of names of his would-be assailants. As Domitian perused the list, the sneaky Stephanus unravelled his bandaged arm. Hidden inside was a dagger. The broken arm had been a simple ruse. He snuck up behind the emperor and attempted to nail him with a fatal blow. But somehow or other he missed, and instead he stabbed Domitian in the groin. The two men had a scrap, during which Stephanus himself was mortally wounded. But by this time, Other conspirators had got past the guards and piled in, stabbing the defenceless emperor another 7 times. How can this be, he thought, as he lay dying, for the hour of his predicted death had passed. Well, it actually hadn't. He was stabbed at midday as foretold. Stephanus had simply lied about the time.